Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Today, we are talking about automation in GRC. It's an issue near and dear to my heart, having recruited in GRC for so long. So, joining me today is Joseph Kirkpatrick and AJ Yawn. They are experts in their respective corners of the industry. So, AJ, I guess we'll start with you. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I lost my screen there of Riverside. I started reloading, but everyone, I'm AJ Yawn. I am currently the director of GRC Engineering at a company called Acquia, which is a government contracting professional services firm. So I do a lot of GRC work for different federal agencies. The company is run by a good friend of mine, Chris Hughes, who a lot of folks in the cyber industry probably know. My career has kind of spanned a lot of different areas. Was in the Army, served 6 years in the Army, ended up earning the rank of captain, did some information security stuff there, along with a lot of other things. Went to Coalfire, did some SOC 2 auditing there, and helped grow that practice from about 9 of us to 130. Started a company, raised some venture capital in the compliance automation space, ultimately sold that and spent some time as a partner at a top 20 CPA firm, and now here at Acquia. So I kind of lived on a lot of different sides of this GRC world. So excited to be here, and recently wrote a book, GRC Engineering for AWS, that is doing well, and I'm in the middle of a book tour on that. So hopefully I can see some folks that listen to this in person over the next few months.
Yes, sir. And we'll put links to your LinkedIn profiles and all your socials and all that stuff in the description of the videos. How about you, Joseph?
Yeah, I'm the founder of Kirkpatrick Price. We are a information security, auditing, and compliance firm that started 21 years ago. When we started, we were the first firm in North America that could do SaaS 70 and PCI, and that was a big thing at the time. It's really kind of what put us on the map and helped us to grow in the way that we have over the years. We focus on being technical auditors. You know, all of our auditors that we hired here since day one, the very first auditor that I hired, as former director of IT, our auditors have to be CISOs or director of engineering, CIO, that type of role, so that they are technologists and they can understand the technology that they're auditing. So we want to bring that level of expertise so that the audit can be worth it and not just a stamp on a piece of paper. And so that's what we're all about.
Awesome. Well, appreciate the background. So obviously the focus of the conversation today is automation. So maybe we'll start with you, Joseph, since you were second in your intro there. Do you believe that compliance automation is a net good or a net negative for the industry?
I like automation. I think that what's happening with automation is really bad, what's happening. And, just to kind of get things started, just to put it in AJ's face here, to get things going, where I part ways with AJ is when he says very, kind of overarching statements about compliance automation will, replace this, replace that. Compliance automation is the answer. And that's where I part ways, because I like automation. My position is that you should automate some things. You can't automate everything. And, that's where I'm at on it. Like, our firm uses automation. We leverage the technologies, that AJ talks about, but you can't do that with everything. And it's not going to do everything for you. And so that's my position on it. I like the term selective automation. I've had my guys waste so much time like chasing access to an API and it's just like, just look at the thing, and get it over with, rather than chasing this. But there are areas where absolutely, automation helps us, but it's just the statements that are being made about, automation is going to replace, or you can completely automate. That's my position. I don't agree with that.
Gotcha. How about you, AJ?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this would be a shock to most people. Like, I agree, like everything can't be automated. Like in a SOC 2 assessment, there's board of directors controls. Like there's no level of automation that we're going to do to review board of directors meeting minutes. I guess maybe now with AI tools or something, but I don't know what the value would be in that. But when I think about the technical controls, if we just talk SOC 2, and I think about CC6, 7, 8, some of availability, some of confidentiality, I would have to be, I think there's like verifiable proof and tools out there that will automate. And I would have to see, less than 100% of those technical, and when I say technical, I'm talking about like infrastructure related and software change related to SDLC, CC.80 type of controls that can be automated. And I think it's a net positive on the automation in that front because of the era that we're in. I don't believe that it's even possible to do a efficient job to get to the CPA language of reasonable assurance manually with the amount of data in some of these systems. There's just too much data. A lot of the resources, a lot of the infrastructure isn't even long lived. So if we're not capturing the information when the resource actually exists and we're waiting for some predetermined point, chances are I'm looking to see if an EC2 instance was patched that was just stood up yesterday. And I have no clue about what happened 6 months ago. So I think it's more for me, and I realized this pretty early in my career, back in 2017, 2018, when I was doing these audits at Coalfire, and I looked around and most of our clients were hosted on AWS. And this was Vanta was just starting to get around, but the tool was very, very nascent. And there wasn't a lot of those tools out there. But I quickly realized there's a lot of stuff on these cloud providers that allow us to get the data directly from the source and not have to rely on what I think sometimes is just the outcome of a control versus actually the performance of the control. And I'll give a very easy example of that. Like we often ask for a list of changes. We often ask for tickets after we get those changes that prove X, Y, and Z. Everything that we're asking to be proved in a modern environment is done in the pipeline. Is done in the CI/CD pipeline. So my stance is instead of asking for the outcome of the control, how about we go get the data directly from the source within the pipeline? We should be living in the pipeline. And I think it's good that Joseph mentioned that a lot of his auditors are people that have to be technical, because I think a lot of the challenges with getting the information out of the pipeline are just a lack of knowledge, a lack of education. That's why I wrote a book, was because I didn't think there was enough education out there to help auditors figure out, how do I get this information out of the pipeline? How do I actually live in there? So I agree that everything can't be automated. I do think that just with, and if I look at kind of what's happening outside of GRC, it's very tough for me to believe that we're not going to see the same step level changes within GRC that we're seeing in other areas, just with some of these coding tools. Being a founder that has built a software product from scratch, from an idea on a napkin to an actual product that people were paying for and using. And that was so hard 5 years ago, so difficult. And now I can do some of the same stuff with just one of these AI IDEs. And it would be naive of me to think that same level of innovation and technology and ability to do way more than I used to not be able to do without significant humans that had significant skills is not going to come to our area of GRC. And I think my push is for GRC professionals as a whole, whether that's auditors or internal folks, to get more technical skills to be able to take advantage of the technology that is inevitably coming our way.
Yeah. The thing about having people who can do that, I think a lot of CPA firms are doing that. Not all, but all of the ones that I know of and that I interact with, are doing this. For me, Tony De La Fuente, I think is his name. He's the guy who wrote Prowler. We started using Prowler in 2016. It's that is the way, to improve how you're going to get that proof during your audits. And then you struggle with people not wanting to give you access, to be able to do that. We still struggle with that today. But as a CPA firm, we embraced that technology. We did that in 2016. I think a lot of people did. Prior to that, we were using PowerShell scripts. Automation is good. It's just that some of the things I hear you say, AJ, are like, I think, confusing people because, for example, like the other day, I looked at some Terraform output, no changes in the environment during the audit period. Okay. As an independent auditor, I want to validate that, like that's not enough for me. That's not enough for reasonable assurance. That's not enough for evaluating control risk, and there has to be some corroboration elsewhere, especially when it's like no changes, because you don't see that a lot, but even if it told me what the changes were, okay, those commits in the repo, that's the gospel. I mean, you can't get any better proof than that, than looking at that Terraform output. But I still want to talk to somebody on the team. I still want to understand, I want to look at the commits in the repo. I want to look at the branch protection rules. Those are important things to do to validate that the control is working. And I think where people get confused sometimes about this automation stuff is that should be enough. I gave you the Terraform output. It showed you what the changes were. I don't want to talk to you. What's wrong with you? Why can't you just accept that and move on? And as an independent auditor following auditing procedures, you want to do some corroboration, around that. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess two things. One, I think GRC pros that are kind of managing the internal audit should be able to handle that conversation if they understand the control processes, if they actually have delved into the details. Right now, a lot of them will say, hey, I just got asked by the auditors from Kirkpatrick Price to tell me about the CI/CD process. Can you tell me about the CI/CD process? They don't. They're just passing information, and I don't think.
Yeah.
I get it that you want to say all right, I saw this Terraform output. Tell me about how this works. I don't think that requires the engineer that's doing the activity. I think we should have GRC professionals that can speak to the ownership of the controls. The other aspect, I hear you. I think we should be in the business of protecting the non-GRC people's time. And if I just put my founder hat on, the last thing I would ever want my software engineer to do is spend time with an auditor. Mm-hmm. I need them shipping code. I don't need them spending time with an auditor. And I think the reason why audits and these assessments get a bad rap is because we're pulling in people to answer questions that they shouldn't have to answer, that the evidence should be able to speak for itself in some of these occasions. Like, obviously you get an output that says nothing has happened for 12 months. Like, that would make me want to ask some questions as well. That doesn't make a ton of sense in a modern environment. But I think once we have been able to dial this in and we've been able to have the conversations, hopefully with GRC professionals. And I think GRC professionals, their entire job, I've always wondered this when I used to show up for an audit, like, what have you guys been doing for the last 12 months that you still have to pull these people in? What's going on? But their entire job should be protecting those folks' time. Should not be using those people to kind of have to perform the audit. I don't think that's necessary. The control owner's job is to operate the control. And usually the control is doing all the stuff that they're doing within these systems, right? It shouldn't be being the explainer to the auditor, because in a lot of cases, like, I've been in those situations where the GRC professionals have prepped the engineers to talk to me. I'm not getting real information anyways. I'm getting a prepped, canned kind of story that everybody's making sure we're telling the right story, and don't leave him in the room with AJ because he might say something else when everybody's gone. And so I think the value that we have placed, and when I say we, I think on the audit side, on the traditional ways of auditing, the conversations, hey, I need to double check this, I need to corroborate this. I think a lot of that can be done, especially on the technical controls, with machine readable information, with automated evidence. And then if there are questions, which inevitably there will be, we're looking at a ton of data. I think, and I hope in the future, GRC professionals can answer those questions, and we're able to shield our people, because in my future world, engineers, security engineers, HR folks, everybody continues to be able to do their job and we still remain compliant. They don't even know an audit has happened. But right now, a lot of firms sell on, hey, we're not going to be operationally disruptive. We're going to do a good job to make sure that this isn't, there's a reason why that's in the sales pitch, because these audits have been operationally disruptive. And I think automation allows us to keep this more contained into the conversations between the people that it should be contained with. Like, we're not, even if legal is in other departments, if legal is having a problem with the product, they're handling that at a different level. They're not bringing in an engineer and saying, hey, junior engineer, tell me about your change process. Like, there's just a little bit of abstraction that we have not done in GRC. So I don't know if I don't know if I disagree there. Like, I get it. There's a level of reasonable assurance. You have to have a conversation. I just don't think that conversation has to be the engineer. I think that the engineer should operate the control. And we should be able to prove that they're operating the control through the control. Like, that's a part of our process, from looking at the policies to looking at the outputs. And then if something comes up where it's like weird, hey, tell me about this. And again, if you're surprising the GRC professional with that question, what have they really been doing? And then I think that puts GRC professionals at risk, because when the spotlight comes that every CEO has right now around AI and automation, and they look at security and they're saying, wait a second, all you're doing is passing information back between these people. Why do I need you? Where it should be, you actually know the system, you know the control, you have access as well. That's another thing. Like you said, a lot of times you're like, hey, can you help me out and get access? They have to go talk to 10 people to get you access. And then that becomes a no thing. And it's like, all right, let's just do the screenshot instead. It's a lot easier. It's a lot less operationally disruptive. So I think this requires I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago at an event, that there's a little bit of a meet in the middle that needs to happen between the auditors and the GRC professionals. Like, GRC professionals need to do more work. Auditors should be more open to speaking to the GRC professionals if they're getting the answer that they need to whatever questions they have.
Yeah, I don't think the clients have a problem with protecting their time. They avoid me. They don't show up to the meetings. They don't return my calls. They hurry me. So
But why do you think that is, though? Why do you think that is?
I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
But I think that they by default protect their time. And so we talk about making audits worth it. And the thing that we talk about at our firm is we don't want to waste people's time. We don't want to talk about stupid stuff. That example I gave you about Terraform, absolutely. Let me talk to a GRC engineer. I'm good on that. One of the things I'm seeing, though, about the control owners is that they're not getting a lot of security interaction. And it seems hard to believe, but a lot of people, when you start talking to them, like a couple months ago, we had a streak of 8 projects in a row where we found SQL injection. And, SQL injection had disappeared for a while, and the last couple of years it's back, and so we've been really honed in on it. And we had that streak going, and it's like, having that conversation, like someone who's sat in their seat, not somebody who's following a checklist, not somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, but somebody who can sit down with that person and say, let's talk through what you're doing, why this is happening. Let's try to get to the root cause of this. It's very valuable for a control owner to have a conversation with a qualified auditor. It's a waste of time for them to have a conversation with somebody who's just going through the motions, So those kinds of conversations are important. There was another one where we were looking at a Docker file, and they'd had a recursive change, and they were calling a image from 2014, And so it's like, let's talk about that. In that situation, I don't want to talk to the GRC engineer. Now, in your world, you're talking about your world, right? In the future, that GRC engineer should fix that problem.
Should have seen it. Yeah, should have seen it well before you came. Absolutely. I think those are the challenges
today.
Yeah.
You
said something earlier that I want to double click on. What you mentioned, sometimes the things I say are confusing kind of clients or the audience out there. When you say that, what do you mean by that? Like the confusion?
Well, I think your statements come across as compliance automation is the answer. Compliance automation is better than, and I want to get into this point because I think it's a big issue. Compliance automation is better than, once a year validation. I think there's 2 issues there, that we need to differentiate. And that's where I think it gets confusing. You do mock. I hope you understand. I'm a very blunt person, AJ.
No, I was in the Army, man.
Okay, you're fine. You're fine.
Raised by a Marine.
You do mock CPAs,
Yeah.
and you're just like, why are CPAs doing this? Which you should know the answer to that because you did.
I know the answer, but I still don't think I don't think it's a good answer, frankly. Like, I understand why CPAs have ended up in this position. I understand the history of how we've gotten here, but a lot of like what I say is coming from a place of like deep understanding. When I was running my company, my co-founder was Jeff Cook, who authored the SOC 2 guide, who I worked with a long time at Coalfire. The AICPA invested in my company. I was a part of the AICPA's SOC training and curriculum and all of that good stuff. So like, even when I went through that, I'm like, wait a second, like this is all about the CPA part of this. This isn't about the technical part. And my question of why are CPAs still in this, outside of obviously it's a big business and SOC 2 is a huge aspect of revenue, is there hasn't been if we go back to the reason why we even have SOC 2, we trace it all the way back to SaaS 70, all the way back to SOX, all the way back to Enron, and like how we kind of got here. Does that reason still apply today of having a CPA in here? And again, like I think the first chapter of my book is First Principles Thinking for GRC. So if we're thinking about SOC 2 from a first principles perspective, what does a CPA provide as the only one that can do this audit that someone else couldn't? And if we look at other frameworks, PCI, ISO, to become a FedRAMP 3 PAO, high trust, like there's a little bit of more of a on-ramp to becoming qualified to do those things, where I know, again, from experience, you can have a CPA license, have zero cybersecurity background, have zero interest in learning cybersecurity background, but you can still issue a SOC 2 report.
You're not supposed to, though.
I agree, sure, but that doesn't mean that it's not happening. That's the other part is like, you're not supposed to, but then there's nothing stopping it. There's no accountability to say, hey, why is this random person who has been a tax person for the last, some CPA randomly hit me up, hey, I'm thinking about getting in SOC 2, should I do it? And I look at their page and they've been doing tax for 20 years. And it's like, they see the opportunity. So like the question, the reason why I put that out there is just like, what's the reason now today? I know the reason why we got here, but what today qualifies a CPA or even the AICPA to be involved in something that has become a proxy for third-party security?
Well, I've got several things to say about this. But first of all, it's just like, I think when you say, why are CPAs doing this? That would be like, why is this podiatrist treating my cancer? It's like, you shouldn't go to a podiatrist for your cancer. But they're both medical professionals. They're both licensed professionals. Right. But you wouldn't go to a podiatrist for a heart problem or something else. You look for that specialization, and people who care about their cybersecurity, their compliance, what have you, they need to get in the game. And it's the same issue. I'm not going to have a real estate attorney represent me in a criminal trial, and so why are you having a tax professional test your cybersecurity controls? It's silly. It's ridiculous.
I agree. Yeah. But if I went to a podiatrist to treat my cancer, there'd be a really bad outcome. If I took a real estate attorney to defend me in a criminal trial,
I think there's a bad outcome going on in audits.
Is there though? Yes, but if you look at it from the founders and the CEO's perspective on the service organization side, they call up their buddy and say, hey, I got this firm who said it's going to be $40K for a SOC 2 type 2, but I got this other firm who said it'd be $5K. Who did you use? They said, I used the $5K one and I closed all my deals still. Yeah. Like from a business perspective, you're a business owner. It's like, wait a second, like, why am I paying a premium when my buddy who I trust is getting the same outcome? I'm doing this to close a deal. And I think, again, like that is part of the problem is there's no ability to say, you're going to a podiatrist for a cancer problem right now. The report gets out there, and then it's up to the industry to figure this out, where I think there should be more of an internal look. So like, I understand your point of view. Like, I wish people cared more. It's why I love GRC, because I think it's important. It's why I started a business in SOC 2, because I thought it was like, hey, I'm solving a problem. It's like, you want to be a painkiller, not a vitamin when you're starting a thing. But then like you start to look and like, wait a second, am I solving a problem? Like, or is this, we lost the plot to where now it's gotten too far gone that now we have the ability for somebody who knows zero about cybersecurity, not hiring the people that you're hiring, and they're issuing the same exact report, 4 sections, same exact framework, going through peer reviews, getting all this done. To me, it's one of those things where like one bad apple, kind of spoils it all, because now people are using your report may be 100x higher quality than mom and pop who's doing BS, but both are going to Microsoft to say, do business with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I do think Microsoft is scrutinizing that more. I think we're at the very beginning of this. Like, I do think these problems are going to, kind of bear out. Let me just share real quick here. Am I sharing my screen?
I'm not seeing anything.
Oh, hold on. There's one other button. How about now? Am I sharing it now?
Yep.
Okay. So, this is compliance automation right here. I was this is a trust center. This is and it said at the top, controls are being continuously monitored. There's a little label above this, well, they're not, and that's not a good thing, to have a page that's saying things are being continuously monitored when this isn't, and this isn't, and this isn't, and this isn't, logging isn't being continuously monitored. And so on this site, when I downloaded the SOC 2 report, this is one of my clients' vendors, that I'm doing during the audit. This is what compliance automation is doing. This is what those $5,000 reports are doing. It's just like the control is restricting physical access to facilities and protected information assets. And the testing was inspected a vendor directory. The entity selects, develops, and performs ongoing and separate evaluations to ascertain whether the components of internal control are present and functioning. We inspected the vendor directory, and so it's just, this is not something to be promoted, this is something to be criticized. This is something where we need to say, hey, automation is bad, in this case, because you're not getting testing.
But is it the automation that's bad, or is it the firm that issued that report?
Well, I think they've joined at the hip.
Yeah, but the automation platform couldn't. The automation platform can't. The automation platform can't issue a report without the firm, and I think that's to me is like where I keep coming back to, like, and I think the AI CPA can answer my question of why CPAs are in it. I think it's low hanging fruit.
Yeah,
requires some training. Requires some kind of repository directory of the firms like High Trust does. There's only a certain amount of firms that can do High Trust. There's only a certain amount of FedRep 3PAOs. There's only a certain amount of PCI QSAs. And there's certain requirements of training and knowledge that are required to prove that you're able to do that. And then create a portal to upload these reports. I think even if no one ever looks at this, just the aspect of having a portal where I have to go send this and my license on the line, because that's what I hear from every CPA is like, well, I'm signing this, my license on the line.
Yeah.
But it's like, there's no accountability. So your license is only on the line if you kind of self-report or find some way to go tell on yourself to your buddy who does the peer review. So I think the AI CPA can answer the question of why a CPA is involved and make it a better answer, because right now I don't think we have a good answer.
I think it's going to change. I think the accountability is going to change, because this stuff that's happening, it's wrong. It's unethical. And, and I do think that the practices that we're seeing from the automation providers are like leading this, like they're like, causing this to happen. But like, I want to go back to why, and I've been involved on both sides of this, because I'm a PCI QSA. I'm a high trust assessor. I'm an ISO lead auditor. I do all the frameworks. And, what's important about this, a CPA doing this, it's the public part of it. It's the public trust. And that's where we're failing right now. This is not good for the public, what's happening. And, it's misleading. It's unethical. The controls aren't being tested properly. We're not doing the things that you want us to do, which is actually, become experts in something. Because, if I were somebody doing financial statement auditing and I'd never audited a oil and gas company before, I can't do that. Exactly. I'm not supposed to do it. And so it's the same thing here, and, but that's what's important is that, I'm required by law to be independent. I have to do this ethics training. I have to think about the public over the company who's paying me, which is, it's hard to do. It's a tightrope that you walk, and, but you have to have that mindset. And it was probably 15 or 20 years ago, the security industry tried to get licensing going. And, you have it for private investigators, right? You have it for security guards, but we don't have it for security professionals. And the problem with a high trust assessor or PCI assessor or whatever is they can offer managed services totally fine. They can do consulting of the control design totally fine. Now you can't do that in the new version of the other type of rock. But anyway, there's a lot of that going on where people who are CISSPs, they're working for a company who's selling hardware, services, managed services. And that's where the conflict of interest, comes in. And so, we don't have a managed service arm. We don't have a, consulting arm because of those threats to independence. And right now, and I think that accountability is coming, but right now that stuff is a major problem. Yeah. And anyway, but I think the people who aren't independent aren't the answer either.
Right. And the PE money that's in there where you have PE firms that are invested in a firm and also invested in the automation platform. They're sharing customers, and there's a lack of incentive to do a thorough job because the folks on your board are incentivized for both of you to make more money. I think there's just a lot I hope accountability comes. I hope the AICPA wakes up and does something, because I think while it sounds like obviously that you all are doing the right thing and trying to go about it the right way, there's just a proliferation because of the amount of customers that the Vantas and Dradas of this world can go out and grab at the startup level and say, again, that I tried to have some empathy for the customers, because I think a lot of times the conversation is blaming them of you don't care about security. And it's they do, but they also have to build a business. They also have to, so it's I can't be mad at them for saving 30 grand when I remember having 3 million in the bank for a company. 30 grand is a lot of money at that stage, a lot of money. That's a huge decision. So I get their decision process when they get a buddy who's at this company called Vanta who came out of Y Combinator. They came out of Y Combinator and they're if you pay us 5,000, you'll be good. They're going to choose that option. And until that option is no longer on the table, the quality as a whole that's out there. And I agree with you that things are changing. A few CISO buddies of mine are taking a harder look at certain reports, depending on where they're coming from. They're diving deeper. I think the risk here, there's two risks. One, SOC 2 is the de facto standard for third-party risk management. It's built into a lot of these systems. So regardless if people want to believe or not that these things are used for real security and the quality is wide range, they are. We're making security decisions in our biggest threat vector, which is why I care so much about it. It's everybody knows third-party security is a huge weakness, and yet we're using SOC 2s that can range from what you just showed us to high-quality ones to determine that third-party security, right? And at the same time, we know it needs to be better. like everybody kind of collectively is yeah, man, not great. We should probably have a change. And it's this, it's in no other area of security would we do this, where we have a known weakness, a known threat opportunity, a known problem. And we're just hey, man, that's just the way it is. Capitalism. We don't do this in any other area of security. And that's what really makes me mad about this, is because it's I get that there's good people doing a good job out there. But if we look out and we talk to a lot of the people that are out there, they see it as security theater. And this stuff is so important. Like it can't be security theater, especially today. And I think that's why we either need to figure out a way to get some accountability, or I think what we're seeing is now is starting to see a pivot away from SOC 2. It's like, let me just try something else, because it's creating more questions and answers. It's creating more problems for people than actually providing what it's supposed to be, like originally. Like, hey, let's get audit once so I can go talk to multiple of my vendors. And like you said, even Microsoft's getting more strict. And like I can see the writing on the wall, right? Like the security industry is self-policing because the AICPA hasn't policed it. And if we get to a point where they completely self-policed, now we're either going to create a new framework, which like, please no, or the SOC 2 is just going to go away. And now we're going to have to rely on these other ones, which I think the benefit of SOC 2 was the flexibility. That's the thing I love the most about it, was I can take a control that says the entity has logical access, blah, 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 and I can tailor the control or the criteria. Then I can tailor the control to your organization. I can actually make it make sense, because good security requires context. That flexibility to me has now been used as a weapon to discredit and make this thing less valuable. And it's like, that's the part that has to shift. And I think if we can get to the point where we can answer that question of like, why is a CPA involved? And there's like, hey, all the stuff that you're saying, ethics, professional judgment, skepticism, I know, like, because I have a lot of CPA buddies who sometimes are really upset with me, right? Like, yeah, like there's a lot that you all go through to get that license, to maintain that license. And I'm not trying to talk down on the license. What I'm talking down on is right now we don't have the answer to the question of why a CPA is involved. And I think there's things we can do, similar to financial statement, other areas of this of your life, like this, there's things that AICPA can do, there's things that firms can do to ensure that, hey, it's not just the CPA license that allows me to do this, and it's the fact that here's what we know, here's the things that we're doing. And I think that's the push we need. But it's not all on the auditors, it's on the companies too. Like, companies need to choose better auditors. They need to stop choosing the cheapest option. The AICPA needs to do something, but then auditors do need to meet companies halfway there when they're bringing innovative solutions. I was talking to somebody the other day. I mean, I ran into it. Like, I automated a bunch of stuff, spit out a bunch of JSON, and the auditor was like, can I get an Excel? I'm like, like all of this work for an Excel sheet. So it's like, there has to be a middle ground here somewhere to get to a solution that
I think that's what all of this stress is doing. You know, I think all of this chaos and this ridiculous stuff that's going on right now, I think it is causing people to think, and that's a good thing. You know, I'm just frustrated with, you know, I feel like the compliance automation tools are like speaking for the profession, you know, and I think in a way, like, my position is automation has failed, because it was like, okay, we were automation, then we were cloud security posture management, then we were vendor management. Now we're doing some AI stuff to try to win some deals, you know, and now we're making guarantees about outcomes. Now we're selling it for, you know,
timelines.
Delve is saying 15 hours, you know, this Vance is saying 3 weeks, you know, whatever. And it's like, this is embarrassing. You know, you can't sell your software based on the merits that you came out with, which was to automate, which I support. Great, do it. But like, you're just like reaching because of the money, you know, and because of the marketing and because of the competition and all that. And it's harming the public, you know, and they're the ones, you don't even know who the CPA firm is, you know, who's issuing the report. And that stuff is just, I think, really bad, you know. But one thing specifically I want to get to before we run out of time, because, you know, I am asking you, AJ, I am asking you to, you know, this thing about, because there's a movement for, continuous monitoring, right?
Yeah.
100%. I support it. Like I was saying before, it's the GRC engineer who needs to find that problem that I found in the audit. That you've got to find that problem the day it happens, not 9 months later when the auditor comes in. Totally correct. But that's one thing. That's continuous monitoring for you to operate the controls and all that. But, you know, validation, assurance, you know, someone independent coming in and saying, this is what's going on here. And that's why CPAs do this, because it's a look back, you know, at a period of time, and you're issuing an opinion about, hey, how's this program working? And you do have to do validation. You do have to perform procedures, in order to make that opinion. And I think what that says to people about continuous monitoring is, hey, you don't need this once a year thing, or quarterly. We've got some clients, we do quarterly rolling reports, right?
Yeah.
Some of the big companies do that. But we're not going to make an opinion daily. We're not going to give a continuous third-party opinion. But the idea that a company is going to be honest about it, I deal constantly with people saying, take that out of the report. We don't want people to know that we're not patching. We don't want people to know that we don't have. I deal with that constantly. And that's the inherent threat, from the companies being audited. And if they get to game the reporting and the continuous monitoring without validation, without assurance, and say, oh, we can give you access to, our checks and the engineering that we've put together so that you can see what we're doing all the time. I'm sorry, I don't trust it. You can call it a trust center, but it's not trustworthy, because I know that their motivation is counter to that. And that's why in the 1930s, CPAs came in and had to be the ones to validate financial statements, because statements were being made that weren't true. And we have that same problem today. So I just, I want us to be careful with that, because people think that that's as good as assurance from a third party. And my position is it's not.
Yeah, I personally don't think they're in conflict with each other. And I'll kind of explain what I mean there. And again, this is coming from just like a real situation, real experience. Shameless plug. It's actually chapter 9 of the book. I talk about this case study from a SOC 2 perspective, but with a large federal agency, 120 plus AWS accounts. In the federal government, they have this continuous authority to operate thing where you do have to check controls on a continuous basis. And the assessors are checking that on a continuous basis. So we set up automation that allows for continuous monitoring on the security and internal side, but then puts all of that evidence, all of that artifacts into, we use AWS Audit Manager. It could be sent to any GRC platform, any tool, but every day there is an evidence folder that is hash, time, date stamp of the evidence for all of the infrastructure controls. We've automated 152 controls out of 348 for this federal agency, like I said, across 120 systems.
Mm-hmm.
And the assessors now can say, I want to go back to September 15th and see how this control CM2 was performing. And they can go open a folder and see every single control, can see all of the evidence. And that's the JSON that exists that we produce. Mm-hmm. But now we send a Excel file via a Lambda function that sends out via Amazon SES on every Friday morning to the assessors that says, here's your sheet of all of the controls and the status of the controls. They can go back and look at any point in time. So I think if we can get to a point where we're doing continuous monitoring right, and then we can take the artifacts from that continuous monitoring, and an example there is every time a change is pushed, there's a reference pipeline that puts it through SaaS, DAS, container scan, secret detection, X, Y, and Z. The artifact from that scan from GitLab is in Audit Manager, tied to controls. So the assessor can look at software changes. And to me, that's continuous. Continuous monitoring is just me setting that up, putting the Python scripts in place, setting up Security Hub, doing all this stuff, right? The continuous assurance is storing the artifacts for you, the assessor, to come and look at whenever you'd like, to get that information, perform your sample, and you can say, hey, I need evidence of data encryption at rest from the 15th of every month from the past 12 months. Mm-hmm. I've been on that side, right? I've done SOC 2 testing. I never was able to do that. Yeah. There's no way I could go back and say, unless we look through sys logs and we're going, and that just doesn't make sense financially for me to spend that much time to do it. So I think if we're doing continuous monitoring in the way that I talk about in the examples that I've given out there, the labs except that I've done, it produces continuous assurance that you can leverage to then actually do your job. I think what you're saying is you're not getting those artifacts from the conmon. So you still have to go back and say, I need to see how this control is operating for 12 months. It's cool that you've been automating this and doing this doing this check all year long, and maybe you did fix some things, but you have no way to prove that to me right now. And I 100% think that's true. That's the part that we've been missing with this whole, you said CSPM, compliance automation, is I firmly believe you can't even talk about compliance automation unless you're thinking about both sides of the table. If you're not getting any benefit from it, there's no automation. It doesn't make sense. So the automation has to be available for you to do your job.
And that's what I'm saying. Those are parallel highways. Like, what you've implemented there is great for the organization to continuously monitor and ensure that those controls are operating, and so that there aren't any surprises when it's time for assurance. They're doing all that. It's just that, that secondary step, like when the assessor is going into the repository and looking at the evidence, like they're not doing that. They're not doing that continuously,
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the Fed world,
a time where they do that. I'm just saying those things.
But I guess parallel. Even in that case, right? Like, let's say, like an audit, a 12-month audit, right? Like your review period goes January to December. Usually you're going to come in November, December timeframe, right? To kind of do your engagement so you get full coverage of the review period. If continuous monitoring is done right, where it produces continuous assurance, you should be able to go back at any point in time and gather the evidence. Again, I don't think that's common. I don't think that's normal right now, but it's possible is what I've been trying to say. And I think it comes off as this like futuristic thing, but like what I try to tell people, like, no, like you can do this today without a GRC tool on every major cloud platform. Yeah. You can do continuous monitoring that produces continuous assurance, that gives you the ability to come in and say, I'm going to sample every Thursday that is odd numbered from the entire review period. And you can get that information. Like, to me, that's true 12-month review period auditing. The come in and say, hey, let me get a spreadsheet that proved that you did user access reviews these random months. Like, to me, you're not proving anything. You're proving an outcome. And that's the security theater. And I think like what I like have tried to make clear, and I think this is kind of gets back to the confusion piece that you mentioned before, is like a lot of what I'm talking about, I've done, I've seen done, and it's possible. Is it common? Absolutely not. I hope it gets common over the next 3 to 5 years, but it is possible, at least from an infrastructure and software perspective, to do continuous monitoring that produces continuous assurance that I think would meet any sampling methodology, regardless if you're the most strict or you're the big four and you only sample 10%. Like, whatever it may be, you could do your sampling as needed with this method to get all of the information you need. And again, I'm seeing it daily. We have assessors that are using this stuff, and they're on it. They have to do continuous assurance. It's different in the federal space because they're actually every week having to check controls on a regular basis. But like, they're able to get whatever information and data they need from this thing, from the evidence perspective. And I think that's the world we have to get to, where you can say, hey, last July on the 20th, show me how this control was operated. Yeah. Because a lot of those resources don't exist in December. They're gone. Right. They've been deployed. They've been destroyed. So now it's like, what are we checking?
One is assurance and one is monitoring, and they're not the same thing. And I'm just hearing a lot right now in the market about that one will replace the other. And I don't think people understand that. No, we're talking about two different disciplines. Yep. And so, I mean, because I've reviewed, continuously gathered evidence where, like, alerts, for example, at some point during the year, they had a personnel change, they had a system change or something. That green mark was there in Vanta the whole time, that the alerts were enabled. Exactly. But then you start doing the assurance procedures, and you discover that no one was monitoring that particular box starting in June, Right. And they didn't know about it and they missed it. And that's assurance. And the other one is, continuous monitoring. So that's the thing I'm just trying to educate people about, because, when I come into an environment, let's say an environment that does not have one of the GRC tools. Okay. I like to start wide and get specific. What security tools are you using? What APIs are available? Right. What is your engineering team doing? Because lots of opportunity to automate without a GRC tool. You know? And that's where I like to start, because when people come in, okay, we're going to set up a tool. They just get in this like tunnel vision and thinking that's all it is. this is all you should look at, and this is all this is our scope. But then you do your thing as an auditor, if you're good, if you're skilled, and hey, there's a Citrix server over here without MFA on it, there's no API for that. There was no, that wasn't connected with the platform or whatever, but, following through the data flow, we found that way that people were logging in over here, and that was a risk. And so it's just, I think people are ignoring stuff like that now because they're so hyper focused on the automation. And it's like, I want them to use automation. I just don't want them to ignore everything else because there's some other important stuff out there, we had this one, this was a compliance officer who, she was mocking us like you do, AJ. And she was like, why are you coming to the office? That's so 20 years ago, you're so ancient, and it's all in the cloud. Well, I know that it's not ever all in the cloud. It's just that whole thing is just a misnomer, So we go to Fort Lauderdale. She flies down. She's upset. We walk through the processes. We talk to the people. There's data everywhere. They're doing all these things with the data. They're sharing it. They were, in this case, which is 20 years ago, they were printing it and shredding it, and all this stuff. But anyway, she was like, I had no idea this was happening. She's the compliance officer. Yeah. She's like, I had no idea that they were doing this with the data, and it's like, if they hadn't gone through that audit, if they didn't have somebody who wasn't like looking, if they had just done AWS audit manager in the cloud, they would have had all their controls. Their report would have talked about all those controls, but it wouldn't have talked about what this back office process was doing, where they were at real risk for, some kind of an issue because of how much data was floating around. So it's stuff like that where I think people are like, why are you even looking for that? And it's like that because that's where the risk is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's good that we've got here, especially towards the end, that like there's a clear difference between continuous monitoring and continuous assurance. I 100% agree with that. I did a post recently that we got to stop asking auditors to trust green check marks. It's just not fair. It's not, they have to do their job. And I completely agree. I think part of that, like coming on site or like, obviously that was an old school situation, but I think part of the challenges as well for auditors like yourself who want to do a good job, that the framework was last updated in 2018. Probably should go through a little bit more of a refresh to allow you to still meet the requirements, but still do a job that makes sense in the modern world. Versus like, do we really care about a startup whose board consists of their CEO and co-founder if they're meeting talking about objectives? Like, is that important for that company, right? And like, so I think I will take that on as well, like in my content, to make sure that people understand there is a clear difference between continuous monitoring and continuous assurance. And everything that I'm talking about from a GRC engineering perspective is to help with the continuous assurance part. The continuous monitoring happens if you do these activities, but the whole point of it to me, that's the difference between a DevSecOps. A lot of people ask me like, everything you're talking about sounds like DevSecOps engineering. Like, it's just like, that stuff, like weaving some of that stuff together. I was like, well, the difference is we're taking the stuff that's happening and creating artifacts for the assurance piece. That's the difference. DevSecOps doesn't care about that. We're going to take the stuff and I think that to me is the secret sauce. Like, if we can get to a point where we produce these artifacts that you can actually use to do your job and do it at a high level, the assessors that I'm working with right now at the federal agency, they said, we are getting information that we never would have gotten if we did this manually. Yeah. That was a quote from them. Like, it's just it's literally impossible. The challenge, though, is in our world, on the commercial side, you're expected to trust these green check marks without seeing the underlying data. Yeah. That doesn't work in the federal world. There's no way they're accepting green. Like, they have to see the data, and that's what we've done. We provided the data. And I think that's the piece. If this automation is going to work, you have to be able to get to continuous assurance, where you can actually validate at any point during this review period, this control was operating effectively, which is obviously the point of a SOC 2 Type 2, but it's very difficult for us to actually see that and get that. And we can't trust a green check mark. Like that's just not going to work. And I think that's the problem with the industry right now is there are people trusting these green check marks without looking at the underlying data. But if we can, to your point, there's a lot of energy, a lot of movement. Something's going to happen. We're going to have a moment. Something's going to happen that's going to really spark some change. And I think if we can get to the point where we are doing continuous assurance in the GRC world, and hopefully it's on the backs of people doing GRC engineering work, we all elevate. Like everybody wins here. It all becomes more important. We all become more valuable. We're not doing this race to the bottom that's happening right now in this industry. It's all about value.
It's got to be better.
How much it's going to cost. Yeah.
It's got to be better, which is what I'm all about, AJ, you know. Now, one last thing. I just want to, I want to hear your confession, AJ, about this. Like the stuff that is going on right now, the nonsense, okay? And you see it. Like, you were the first, weren't you? Like when you had Bite Check and you had Bite Check Assurance and you connected them together, weren't you the first?
No, I mean, I was at Coalfire does that. It's the same. Same.
Okay.
So I worked at Coalfire before that because Coalfire, A-Line, these are not CPA firms. They have A-Line Assurance. They have Coalfire Controls. So that model was literally what I learned being at Coalfire. Coalfire Controls is a Denver CPA firm. Jamie Kilcoyne, great guy. He's the guy that runs Coalfire Controls, and he relies on Coalfire systems, cybersecurity professionals. So the setup I did, which is like why it was like always funny to me that I became like everybody kind of has that viewpoint. AJ was the first guy to do this. Was not. It was at the company I worked at before.
I get that about Coalfire and Airline. What about the linkage between the tool and the CPA firm, though? Like, do you think that is good, what's happening? Because there's a bunch of people doing it now.
No, I don't think it's.
I think it's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a problem, but I think the problem started before the tools. Like Coalfire does it, A-Line does it still to this day. A-Line is not a CPA firm. A-Line Assurance is that issues the reports. And there's a lot more. Like ThoroughPass is doing it. Like a lot of people are out there doing it. And I think that again spanned out of we were doing financial audits, and then you can use you know this like. Every report that Coalfire does or any of these platforms, they have the memo of use of an IT specialist. It's the old school kind of thing. That's how they get away with it. So like it's built into the standard to do this. Like while I 100% do not think that that's okay, like there should be, but it's how, Coalfire, A-Line, really big, issue a ton of these SOC 2 reports are doing it, and they're not the only ones, right? Like, so there shouldn't be a entity here and then entity here as the CPA firm, and that can issue the reports using these people. But the standard literally tells you can do that by using IT specialists, and is the way we kind of hide underneath that. But yeah, I mean, I literally was like, hey man, this worked. Like it's working very well. I saw it from the inner workings that Coalfire is doing this very well. A lot of people, some people know this. Like I think I've talked about it publicly. A-Line was about to buy Bite Check right before they had launched Ascend. Not a coincidence they launched Ascend after that transaction fell through. But I've lived in this ecosystem, so I understand how these things work and understand how they get away with it from a standard perspective, because it's not illegal or against the rules in the standard if you do it by the way you're supposed to do it, right? Like if you actually do this, it's actually independent. The CPA, which I would say, like obviously I know this from personal, Coalfire does it right. Like Jamie runs his own CPA firm. He is not tainted by anything. He has a process. He takes in data. He meets with the clients. He's not just over there stamping reports. He's actually doing it, right? So like I'm not saying the setup in it of itself is bad. I think the lack of accountability again is the problem. Like
it introduces threats.
It creates the standard says this, the perception of a lack of independence is all that matters, right? Like that's the thing that matters, but it's the ability to do it. It's like, again, we live in America. Like this is a place where people are going to try to make as much money as possible in a capitalist society. And there's a pattern to follow. And the pattern says, do what these guys have done that have been able to scale up to ridiculous heights. And you can do the paperwork right to keep the separation. What's happening behind the scenes? Like the CPA who signed the reports from Bite Check Assurance, her name was Shonda Knowles Elliott. She did a good job. She was not allowing anybody to taint her. She completely owned Bite Check Assurance. That's the difference as well that we were doing. Like Coalfire Controls, Coalfire has a little bit of piece of ownership there. Bite Check Assurance was its own thing. Like she wanted to call it Bite Check Assurance. I didn't ask her to do this. She wanted to do it. But again, like it doesn't look good. I know that it doesn't look good. And the conversations we would have with customers are like, hey, like this isn't new. This is a pattern that exists everywhere. Here's the things that we're doing to protect independence, to protect you from X, Y, and Z, all of that good stuff. There was an auditor side of the platform we were building. But I think if there was some accountability, it becomes less of a problem. If there was some way to say, hey, wait a second, let's see the quality of what's going on there. Like, let's actually get into what you're doing from a testing perspective. How does this CPA work with the IT specialist? Is it actually what you say in the memo? Or is it just, you're just stamping the report, which you and I know some people are doing that. So yeah, we weren't the first. I don't want to take that. Maybe not the first.
Maybe the alternative practice structure issue will become a thing,
that's gonna drive it.
You know.
Yep.
But I do think, even though I've been doing this for 21 years, I do believe we're at the very beginning, and it's exciting, like what is happening, like in the GRC engineering space, with technologies that are available to us. It is making auditing better. It's just like any technology, you have to, harness it, you have to hone it, you have to use it wisely. And, but it is exciting what's happening, but I do think we're at the very beginning, and there's a lot more to shake out.
And I hope there's a way in the future that it's easier for people from the outside to see the difference between a bad auditor and a good auditor. Like before this conversation and just hearing you talk, I would not have known that you had any of this technical knowledge that you do have, right? So like there's already a level of like, okay, like at least like I obviously don't know how you guys audit or whatever, but like at least I have an understanding, like, okay, these dudes like care, just baseline, but like there's no way for me to gather that information publicly or even looking at a SOC 2 report. Like I can pick up your SOC 2 report, a Coalfire one, an A-line one, mom and pop one, and like, because I know SOC 2 reports, I could find the issues, right? Like I can look through and like navigate, look at section 3, look at section 4, figure out what's going on. But it's very tough for a non-educated SOC 2 reader, right? Which a lot of our readers of the reports are not educated on how the report's supposed to be. I think that's one, if we can just have a line drawn, right? And it's not about Big Four or cost. Like I know that a lot of the conversation is like cost of the audit. Like obviously you pay more for higher quality, but I think it's more about the stuff we're talking about in this conversation, like what's actually happening in an audit, and how do we get to some system like a G2, like we have for software, to talk about publicly how the audit actually went, and not, it was super easy, they didn't do anything. Like that's not a good thing. You want your doctor to actually check things when you go to the doctor. So it's like, yes, this company did some stuff. They didn't ask me for screenshots of things that could be automated. They asked me for real details. They understood things, but like to me, that's another one of the challenges right now. Like it is an exciting time. I think we live in the best time to be alive from a technology perspective, and I ultimately am optimistic about where we're headed. I think it takes pressure from the community. It takes people like myself. It takes these conversations to continue to push the conversation to get the change that we're seeking. But at the same time, I think unless something changes to where people are not incentivized to be shitty auditors and to just get the buck, and there's a way to call that out. Like there's still going to be people that do it if we can call it out, right? People still go eat McDonald's when there's a lot better options out there. But at least they know they're eating McDonald's now. Like there's enough content out there like, hey, that's probably not the best for you to have those chicken nuggets. Like it's probably not the best for you to go to that auditor. If we can get there, then it makes it a lot easier to have these conversations, right? Because it's like, like you work with Kirkpatrick Price. We know what you went through. Cool, I'm good with that SOC 2 report. Who's that? I seen them on the bottom list, right? I seen they got a D rating or whatever as an auditor. So I just hope, I agree with you. Like I'm optimistic about the future. I think this is net positive for GRC. And part of what I'm passionate about with this whole GRC engineering thing and everything I talk about is like, I want to save our profession. I don't want us to become less valuable where people see us as checkboxes, people see us as SOC 2 in 15 hours. Like, no, that's not how this works. Like this is important. It matters. It matters for security. It matters outside of security. It matters for the company as a whole. Like the company's doing governance, risk, and compliance right helps their companies operate better and helps them have better outcomes. But if we don't do something, we're going to put this profession at risk. And I think you agree, like we're in a great time, but things have to, and I think I agree with you. I think we're early. I think, it feels like because of all the billions that have been invested, like it's been a long time. The Vance and Andrade have not been around that long. It's been less than a decade for all of this stuff. So we're super, super early. which is good because of the energy around it. It's going to spark the necessary change that I think we need. But Pete, thanks for putting this on. Joseph, thanks for joining. I know we went back and forth on LinkedIn. I think it's easy for people to do that and not get on a conversation and just talk to each other. So appreciate this. I think obviously like we agree on some things, we disagree on others, but ultimately it's a good conversation for the community to hear and understand that like there could be differing opinions, but I think both of us want the same outcome. We want this stuff to matter. We want this stuff to improve security, improve companies, and the way to do that is just by having pride in our work, doing a better job. So appreciate the opportunity, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Pete.
Thanks, guys. If people want to reach out to you guys, what's the best way to do so?
LinkedIn, website.
Yeah, LinkedIn for me. My website, you can click to view my website there, but LinkedIn, I'm there often.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the great conversation, guys.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, everybody. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.